Hello and welcome to Penticton, Canada. Today we will be exploring the history of the SS Sicamous. This ship is over 100 years old and was built in 1914. As mentioned, the SS Sicamous was launched in 1914, and she did sailings from Penticton to Okanagan Landing, which is now called Vernon, with 14 stops along her journey. The ship boasted 2 passenger decks, 1 cargo deck, and 2 crew decks, if you count the wheelhouse. In fact, the SS Sicamous has not always been in the Okanagan Valley. The hull was actually built in Toronto and transported by train, Canadian Pacific of course, to the Okanagan Landing shipyards, which is just north of Vernon. Then, the upper decks were carved, and imported wood was then delivered to the shipyards to finally make the ship. So not a lot of the materials you see on the ship today actually came from the Okanagan Valley. However, only a year after the ship completed construction, so did the Kettle Valley Railway. This actually didn't put a damper on the SS Sicamous's service life, even though its sisters, built before the Kettle Valley Railway, were in service for much longer. And then, the SS Sicamous would have brought soldiers from here to the Vernon military camp, which is still here today. Then, they would have been sent off to the front lines. So technically, as soon as the Sicamous entered service, it was a troop carrier, even though it didn't carry troops to World War I. Afterwards, the Sicamous could finally begin what she was built to do, passenger service. You see, the SS Sicamous actually did not travel overnight. They only had these rooms because it left very, very early in the morning. So what people would do was book the day before, sleep on board the ship, and then by morning, they'd be departing. The trip was only about 8 hours. The ship boasted luxurious interiors and was well known and well liked among the Okanagan Valley, her and her sisters. These sisters included such ships as the SS Okanagan, which had a murder story linked with her, and the SS Aberdeen. In fact, the captain of the SS Sicamous was a veteran of the inland seas of BC, piloting multiple stern-wheelers like the SS York, the famous SS Mayowie, and as a mate on the SS Okanagan. This ship was also one of the only places in the Okanagan Lake where you could pay 10 cents for a hot bath. Also, it seems the equipment in here, very 1914, definitely. I bet this would be normally serving food, but it looks like it's closed today. The Sicamous also boasted a well-known, luxurious dining room. People would usually travel on the Sicamous just for the luxuries, not because they needed to travel. After the war, the Sicamous would have a relatively uneventful life. However, the Sicamous had a problem with her. That was that it was really slow, as well as that the Kettle Valley Railway was becoming very popular, and the first motorways were beginning to get built around Canada, and soon they would be approaching on the Okanagan Valley. The SS Sicamous was retired in 1936, and pretty soon, the SS Okanagan was as well. In 1934, the SS Okanagan was finally taken to scrap yards in Okanagan Landing, and scrapped. However, be it by luck or by some other thing the Canadian Pacific wanted to use it for, the Sicamous was saved and was abandoned at Okanagan Landing for decades. However, it was clear Canadian Pacific wasn't done with the Sicamous yet, as they took off one of the passenger decks, which you can now see today on the Sicamous. Took me a while to notice that. Eventually, though, the city of Penticton woke up to the reality that the ship that had served their community for so long was now abandoned on the other side of the lake. Towed by a different SS Okanagan, which is now a Mexican bar at the north end of the lake, next to the Fintry Queen, which I should really stop talking about because that is another video. Anyways, she was towed by the SS Okanagan down to Penticton. Eventually she was restored, and today she sits at Penticton near one of the beaches. The SS Sicamous is a landmark of the city and is a notable sight to anyone that lives there. The Sicamous can also be rented out for events like graduation parties and weddings. This isn't sponsored, by the way. However, the SS Sicamous Marine Heritage Society is badly in need of volunteers, as all ships do kind of need an upgrade. Especially the tug Canadian National No. 6, which currently lies right next to the SS Sicamous. If you live in Penticton, I recommend volunteering if you care about the history of the Okanagan. Oh yeah, and the museum also found whatever is left of the SS Okanagan and turned it into a saloon. It's currently not doing anything much, but it's under renovation and should be open in the near future. So, what's next for the SS Sicamous? Will they finally bring her second passenger deck back? And why have I failed to mention the Kootenay Lake steamers? That's a very good question.